everyone. Welcome to Off the Podium. I have a guest today, Stephen Hartke, composer, joining me from the East Coast. I'm not sure where he is exactly. Welcome to Off the Podium.
Thanks, Tigran. Nice to be here.
So the first question, a big question, is USC, professor at USC for so many years, for a couple of decades, and now you're teaching at Oberlin. Why the move?
One of the reasons was that I wanted to be closer to my family, which is kind of small. Mm-hmm. My mother lives in the East, and for 35 years, I was in California. She said, "I wish you lived in the same time zone." And I thought, well, I kept her waiting long enough. I could go back. The other thing is that my son was going to school in Tennessee at the time, and we just thought it'd be nice to be closer. The other thing was that I will admit I was getting tired of LA, the traffic and all that. And my wife is a voice teacher, and she had 3 different jobs and she was on the freeway all the time. She just gets very, very tired of it. And then I came here in order to kind of rework the program, and I was looking forward to having that challenge.
Well, I think I told you in our correspondence via email, but I grew up in LA, and there are some things I miss about LA, but there's also other things like traffic you mentioned. I don't miss too much. What do you miss about LA? What's one thing that you do miss about it?
That's a tough one because I really haven't missed it all that much. I mean, I miss friends who are out there, of course, and sometimes I miss having grad students. But on the other hand, I like the fact that at Oberlin, all the attention is focused on the undergrads, so it's a great experience for them. I guess there's not that much. I mean, we both lived in the same town, right? Yeah. I lived in Glendale for 28 years, and I really liked Glendale. I liked that it was a walkable city, unlike LA, and I suppose food shopping's a little bit easier there, but.
Well, since we're talking about LA, I want you to tell me a little bit about the Pacific Rim, the piece that you wrote. And also, from what I understand, that's one of the only pieces, if not the only piece, that you actually went back and revised it. Is that correct?
Oh, that's not true. I revise pieces all the time.
Oh, really? Okay. Well, at least based on what I was looking on your website and various other things, I looking at the dates and other things, I thought that's the only one I saw. But yeah, if you could tell us a little bit about the Pacific Rim specifically and what you think about revising pieces in general.
Oh, you saw 2 dates. Is that right?
Yeah.
That's because I did a wind ensemble version.
Okay.
It was originally written for the LA Chamber Orchestra, and it was intended for their 20th anniversary, the opening of the 20th anniversary season. And I decided to write a piece that was about LA. So the first part is about, it's something I call ethnomusicological fiction. In that I imagine myself the master of a non-Western musical tradition, of which I know all the rules. And so the first part of the piece is basically a presentation of a melody that's divided up in the orchestra in various ways. And the melody is built on a kind of mode that's a little bit like a gamelan scale, but not. And then it's the coloration, I think, is very much like some aspects of gagaku or some Korean orchestral traditions. High floating chords that are like that mouth organ that have in Japanese, Korean, and Chinese ensembles, and it's a celebration. I meant as a kind of march procession, and then in the middle there's a quiet section which I sort of imagine as flying over the Pacific, and then it deals with the Latin side of the Pacific Rim, and I suppose that the the European American component is just the fact that it's for a Western orchestra.
Mm.
And the second half is a fugue that has just two pitches in it. And it's really a rhythmic fugue that's introduced in cowbells.
Well, since you mentioned all of that, I want you to say a little bit about and I know you're inspired a lot by non-Western styles, as you mentioned, non-Western music. When did that start for you, and what exactly, what genres, what traditions are you inspired by and incorporate in your music?
Well, a lot of it is just from encountering things and that they just percolate for a while, and then you let them out. I have a little kind of set piece that I talk about that I think that one of the challenges and maybe the pleasures for a composer these days is that since at least the 1950s, there hasn't been a common language. My example is that two composers born in Hamburg in 1833 would have grown up hearing the same music. They would have heard the same operas. The only difference might have been if one was Catholic and the other one wasn't. They would hear different religious music. But you take two composers who were born in 1952 in, say, New York, growing up in the same apartment building, the odds that they grow up hearing the same music are actually pretty slim. So I feel that then that means that the challenge and the pleasure for a composer nowadays is to act as a filter of your own musical experience, just to take on board all these kinds of things and see what comes out as you focus in on what it is that you love about different sorts of things. So I've been fascinated by non-Western music for a long, long time, and sometimes I just let it come out. Other influences that percolate through it, certainly is early music, and some jazz and blues and that sort of thing. Those are the things that are kind of knocking around in my head.
Yeah. Well, you've composed in so many different genres for so many different instrumentations. What is it? I've asked this question to many composers, and I get different answers. For you, is it more difficult to get a commission that says you have to write for this specific ensemble? It has to be 5 minutes long, where you have boundaries and rules and regulations, or when someone just says, do whatever you want? This is our ensemble, full symphony orchestra. You could use as many people or as few people as you want. What's more of your, what you enjoy more?
Well, I remember reading once that Stravinsky said that the trick was to figure out what it is you want to do, and then find a way through maybe back channels to get people to ask you for what you intended to do in the first place. I'm not saying that I necessarily get to do that very often. Certainly, there is a stimulus to being asked to do something quite specific, and I guess that my opportunities have been varied. Some things are quite wide open. When I was commissioned by the New York Philharmonic, they said, "Do whatever you want." They said, "You want electronics, you want chorus, children's chorus, soloists, whatever. You can have it." And I said, "I want the Hilliard Ensemble," and that took me back for about a second or two, and then they said, "Okay, that's fine." And I had already worked with the Hilliard Ensemble. And the way I first got to work with the Hilliard Ensemble was that I came up with this idea for a piece, and I thought this would be a great piece to write for them. I was just a fan. I didn't know them. But through a friend, I got in touch with them, and they asked to see the text that I was proposing to set, and right away they wrote back and said, "Write the piece. Go ahead." And it's for 5 male voices, violin, and 2 percussionists. And it's 45 minutes long, and it's in Old Latin, so it's an odd thing to get permission to do, but that happened. I've also sometimes had requests to write certain pieces where I've been a little bit irritated by the strictures, or there's something about the ensemble that or something that I'm not entirely at peace with. But I find that if I start thinking about what it is about the thing that it irritates me, that's actually a stimulus. So, for example, I was asked to write a piece for Lincoln Center Chamber Music Society for David Schifrin and Ida Kavafian, Anne-Marie McDermott, and it's for clarinet, violin and piano. And I've never been terribly happy with the sound of wind instruments with piano. So especially the unison between a clarinet and piano. I thought that was awful. And then I realized, oh, okay, what is it I don't like about this sound? I don't like this kind of harsh and clangorous and out of tune. So I built an entire movement out of having the E-flat clarinet play in unison with the piano, because it's a tone color unto itself. And so I learned to love it for its qualities instead of kvetching that I had to deal with this. No, I just embrace the irritant. I've also, there are a number of pieces that I have written for free or close to for free just because I want to do them. So I have a piece that I wrote as a birthday present for my wife that's a dramatic cantata called Sons of Noah. That's for soprano, 4 flutes, 4 guitars, and 4 bassoons. And for all that odd instrumentation, the piece has been done a fair number of times. I just tell you the way I came up with that combination was I was sitting in my office at USC one day. It was a day for juries, and at that time, space was a real problem at USC. We didn't have enough practice rooms. Now that situation is much better, but so they would assign different areas of the building for different instruments. So there was a row of guitarists warming up for juries outside my office. And in the stairwell, there were bassoonists warming up for their juries. And I could hear both at the same time. And I realized, if I wanted to write a piece that had 4 flutes and 4 guitars and 4 bassoons, I could do that. So I did.
Well, I do want to know, you've done so many, like I said, so many different instrumentations. Is there something that you really want to do, you've just never had the opportunity, have like 15 flutes and 2 clarinets, or something unusual that you really wanted to do and you never got the chance to do it?
Well, I guess there's sort of the bucket list of instruments I'd like to write for. Mm-hmm. And I've been working my way through that, so that I have an orchestra piece that has a banjo part in it. Mm-hmm. And I wrote a piece recently a few years ago for Oberlin that has a flugelhorn. I'd never written for flugelhorn before. This is going to sound strange, but I've always wanted to find out what it'd be like to write for a Hawaiian pedal guitar.
Wow.
A while ago, there was somebody who was a player of that instrument who was trying to get people to write music for it, and I never got in touch with this person because it didn't kind of fit into my plans. But I do like to rethink ensembles. For example, the piece that has flugelhorn in it is a saxophone, like a concert for alto and baritone saxophone. It's a doubler, and for some reason I came up with the ensemble of English horn, clarinet, flugelhorn, 3 percussionists, harp, and 2 double basses. Mm-hmm. And it seemed perfectly natural to me. So mostly the thing that drives me is just the kind of emotional sort of state that I want to be in at a time, and the kind of dramatic thing I want to do. So if I had the wish list is I want to do another opera. Mm. And I have been working with a director, a friend of mine, on fashioning a libretto from the play Rhinoceros by Eugene Ionesco.
Mm. Wow. So many composers out there. It's possibly one of the toughest things to do in classical music now is to be a composer. Sometimes when you teach flute or something, or any of the instruments, you can end up, if you can't really make it to play in the LA Phil or any of the orchestras, you still have a career in trying to freelance and play a little bit. Being a composer is really tough. How, advice to young composers, based on your successful career, what advice would you give them to get to that next level or to pursue their passion and make a living?
Well, I usually start out by saying that they should write for the best players that they know and work on forging those and maintaining those personal contacts as long as they can. I found myself doing that, just writing for specific people, and then that way you get the best performance you can get usually. And it's not hard for people who, so for other musicians or instrumentalists or conductors to hear a piece, as long as they can tell, yes, that's being played the way he intended, then they can say, well, I can imagine that this person could do something for me. Mm-hmm. But the circumstances of my career are different from the circumstances that exist now. I'm not going to say like, oh, it was so hard in my day, but the fact is that the opportunities for younger composers that exist now, there are hardly any. And when I was coming up as a student, when I was at Penn for my master's degree, none of us had our music played at Penn. There was no outlet. And I realized that most of my teachers weren't really played all that often either. And I studied with George Crumb and George Rockberg and major figures, and even they were not getting as much coverage as they deserved. But now there are so many ensembles and so many prizes and grants and international festivals, national festivals, workshops. It seems, for example, like these days, everybody is writing a chamber opera.
Yeah.
And part of this because there is seed money there, and it's kind of one of the ironies about how the arts have gone in America in the last 30, 40 years, is that with the gradual whittling away of federal and state support for the arts, so many people have stepped up in order to fill that void, so there's actually more than back when the NEA actually still had some money to give away. So it does make you wonder if state-supported art is always such a good idea or not.
Yeah.
But it's also I have to say that there's an entrepreneurial spirit in America that it's different from a lot of other countries. I was thinking, I lived in Brazil for a while. I was a Fulbright professor there a long time ago, and in Brazil, virtually every orchestra is state supported or municipally supported, and all the players are then officially civil servants. And then there is no. I was once trying to work with a conductor I knew down there to see if we could put together a touring opera company that could go around to all the great opera houses that were built in the 19th century in the various provincial cities. And we kind of came up against it. There wasn't at that time a tradition of fundraising for projects that were outside of the scope of the state. So I guess then to come back to your original question, what's my advice? My advice is to team up with those people who are putting together those kinds of projects, and so many of our students are doing that, or putting together ensembles or finding ways of collaborating with other people. It's really becoming the norm.
3 or 4 people that inspired you. It might be teachers, it might be people that are not even music related, who inspired you to get to where you are now. It might even be figures from an early age when you were younger, music teachers or otherwise.
Well, the first one would be my choir master when I was a kid. Through a friend, I was recruited to be in a professional voice choir in New York, starting from about the age of 9 or 10. And it was the church itself did not have a choir school. And so we came from all different places. And the other 2 major boys choirs in New York at the time were both associated with the school, and the school didn't like them to freelance as a group. And so we became the go-to ensemble. So the New York Philharmonic, if they needed boys to sing, say, Mahler 3, they would bring them in. So I got to sing with the New York Pro Musica when I was young, and with the Philharmonic, and actually sang the premiere of Poulenc's last chorus and orchestra piece. It was in the opening season of Lincoln Center, and I was an understudy at the Met and all that. But the reason I'm mentioning all this is just to say that the choir master, Stuart Gardner, there was a really important person. He, for example, uh, when we were doing that Poulenc piece, there was a copy of the full score on the piano in the choir room, and I had never seen a full score before. And I was looking at it, and he saw that I was fascinated with it, and I was asking all these questions. And so the next rehearsal that we had, he gave me a score of the Mozart G minor symphony, and as a present. And he said, "Here, I'm sure your dad. My father loved classical music, so I'm sure your dad has a recording of this. So you take this and follow the score and notice what's happening." So that was really important. And then, the various teachers I have, they're all different. But I studied with Leonardo Bellata, who was at Carnegie Mellon, but starting from 1970. But he was also, before he went to Carnegie Mellon, he was the middle school music teacher at my school. I was at the UN school in New York, and he also did the choir for us. So I kind of became his amanuensis, and I learned about part copying and that sort of thing. And he would put on chamber concerts under the auspices of the Hispanic Society in New York, and he would have me come and do things. I'd set up stands and take care of things. And when I listen to his music, I hear a lot of him in my approach to things. He likes transparent orchestral colors, and I think I had a predilection for that already, but I think I learned a lot of that from him. Then I studied at Yale with a guy named James Drew, who's not very well known at all, but who was a very supportive teacher for me in those days. And he taught me about how to ask myself questions while I was working. Because I would come in with something, and he would sit and he'd look at it for a while, go through it, and then he'd turn it around and push it back to me and say, "So tell me about it. What do you like?" And so I would go through and say, "Well, I like this. I'm concerned about that." And he would comment, "Well, I think that this. Don't worry about that. That will work. This, I'm not so sure." That kind of thing. So, there are lots of other people probably I could come up with. My wife Lisa, for one, she's the second set of ears. She hears everything first.
Yeah.
And so I like to talk to her, especially if I'm feeling a little bit fearful. Should I go out on this limb?
Yeah.
She helps a lot with that.
So I know some young composers and conductors or musicians in general. Sometimes we have fears, like you mentioned a little bit, or insecurities. Have you ever gone through those moments, or has there ever been a moment where you're like, I really don't know if I could do this?
Oh, sure, of course. Sometimes you need that. Sometimes you fall into the depths of despair about something, and that's when you see the solution. Oh yeah, I get weary of it from time to time. And there are frustrations. I try and use it as a way to stimulate things by yielding to it. It's like yielding to irritation in order to find a way out.
We're dealing with a very unprecedented situation now with everything that's happening, COVID-19. How are you dealing with it? And what do you think that will have a dramatically negative impact, and maybe some of your ideas that might have a positive idea on the musical world after all of this is done, hopefully done soon?
Yeah, well, I've been fine. My wife teaches voice for non-majors here at Oberlin, and I've been doing. So she's been doing teaching via Zoom, and I've been doing teaching via Zoom and also by email, where people send me scores and then I write commentary back, and I send out lectures or notes about things from my classes so that people can read them, and then we get together and chat some. As for what this does, yeah, I mean the whole question is how many will arts organizations be able to come back quickly? How many will we lose?
Mhm.
As a result of this, or will the entrepreneurial spirit pick it up and carry it along? I feel like that we were in a pretty good place before it hit, and I don't think that people forget how to be creative about finding ways of getting things going. Um,
Yeah. Speaking of getting things going, one thing that's it works for some musicians and some composers, but it also doesn't for many others. Is getting people in the hall to listen to music. And I'm not just talking about modern day composers, the living composers, but even composers that are considered some of the great composers. How do we get people? What can we do as classical musicians or as musicians to get more people interested in what we do? Is there something that we're doing that doesn't work, or is it just the government? We need their support, the education? I know this is a big question, but some thoughts that you have about all of this. How can we get more people interested in what we do?
I would say it's more a question of education and habit than anything else. It's just a question of exposure early enough, and that's the hard one. I think that if you get exposed to it at an earlier age, the earlier the better. Then the more likely you are to enjoy it and comprehend what's going on.
Mhm.
I have read that people who have no musical training at all, that their minds, their brains are organized a little bit differently than those of us who do, and they have that there are pathways that are opened up from musical training that just make it possible to enjoy the experience more. That it's a deeper kind of experience. I do want to say though something and that is that I've read periodically articles lamenting the graying of the audience for as long as I can remember. and and I think there's some sort of, and one thing about lamenting the graying of the audience is saying, well, what's wrong with old people going to concerts? I mean, why they deserve to go to concerts, but also it's just one of the things you notice. I noticed in Disney Hall where you can sit and you can actually see everybody because it's so well lit during the concert most of the time. You can just sit there and people watch when you're at the concert, and you see you see 20 somethings students and so forth, and then then there's kind of a tapering off. You don't see as many people who look to be in their 40s and 50s, and then you see a lot of old people. Now, why is that? Well, people settle down. They have kids.
Yeah.
They have to take care of the kids. I mean, when my son was in those formative years, from when he was born until 16 or so, we didn't go out that much except for things where we had to go out. We took him sometimes, but there were activities that he had to do. It's just like you have a kid, you don't see adult movies, and you kind of forget that they exist. So maybe we should be celebrating more the fact that you get to a certain age and then you start wanting to go back to the concert hall.
Yeah.
And that's not, and also, people are living longer, so the old people can go to the concerts well into their 90s.
I know people know various things about you. Composer, you've taught at all these different places and schools. What's something that your fans or people that know you might not know about you and you would like to share with us? Something you don't mind sharing with us? A hobby or something, whatever comes to mind.
Well, I like to cook.
Okay.
That's a favorite activity, and I do. My wife and I, mostly kind of split it, but I think I do a little bit more.
Uh-huh.
I find that it's a, I don't know, thinking about flavors is like thinking about orchestration.
I was just going to say the same thing.
Mhm.
That's awesome.
I like that. I like that parallel. I like to I like to collect foreign language grammar books.
Okay.
So I just sort of to flip through them. It's not like I'm studying them. Uh, let's see. Um, I tend to be a kind of binge reader,
Okay.
which is that I discover somebody and then I just try and read as much as I can get. So I've been on a strange. I've been on a 19th century American kick. I was doing a crossword puzzle one day, and a favorite crossword puzzle word is Omu, which is the title of a Melville novel. And I've been writing this word in crossword puzzles for years, decades, and I thought maybe I should read that book. So I did, and then I moved on and read Taipei and Pierre and these other Melville novels, that more obscure ones. And then that led me to reading a book about um, the literary scene in San Francisco in the days when Bret Hart and Mark Twain were there, and I realized that there was a whole bunch of Mark Twain that I hadn't read. So then I started reading the other books that are less well known. So that's a habit of mine. It sort of comes and goes. Like all of a sudden, bam! I'm going to spend all my time catching up on this reading. So
Yeah. Well, you won a lot of awards, many awards. What did the Grammy Award mean to you to win that award? Did it mean something more special than all the other things that you've done?
actually, no, that was very strange. Um, it Getting that award, it had absolutely zero impact on my life. The phone didn't ring anymore or any less. It was just the same. I keep the little statue in my office at school, and so it's there for people to see when they come in the door. It's weird. It's interesting to watch people notice it. Oh, is that what's that? Um, I went to the ceremony, and of course, it's the other ceremony that they have is for the categories that nobody's interested in.
Yeah.
And so there's the Christian rock and some of the Latin categories and polka and all like that. And it was in this huge hall, and it was quite dark. And it was what I hadn't realized, because I hadn't been in a TV filming for a long time, was that camera technology is so great that you don't need that much lighting on stage. So it was kind of dim on the stage, but then they had these two screens on the side that were brightly lit that showed what was happening, and it almost felt as if when you looked at the stage and then you looked at the screen, it's like two different things. They felt different. One was this dim thing, it was bright, and I had no idea what was going to happen. And I'm not a member of the Academy, so if I had wanted to bring my wife to the ceremony, the ticket for her was $600.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and if I had lived here, I would not have gone out to the ceremony. It's just not worth it for that. But and I admit I did not go to the big ceremony. I don't know that much about pop music. I'm not that interested in it, and so I didn't go to the after party. I just thought I want to go home. So I went home and slid open the sliding door and went inside. And my wife said hi, and I just said, "Oh, I won." She said, "What?"
That's great. Well, thank you so much. Is there anything else you want to add or talk about before we end today?
Oh, no, I guess not.
Yeah. No, it's been great, and it's been great discovering your music and learning about you, and thank you so much for making time for me.
Thanks, my pleasure.
Yeah. Have a beautiful day. Take care.